Computer, check. Before we get started, this is the Wednesday lecture for week 11. I've picked up a new hobby. I've started with my screen. You may not be able to see, but this is a foam board model. Let me turn my video filter off for a second. Yeah, none. I said, oh, none. Okay, this none. I did a model for, this is a Sith Fury class interceptor, and I just did this for the proportions, and so I could scale it down because I'm actually building it from scratch out of plastic that you can buy at the hobby stores. There's one down in Ipsy, and so I'm crafting this as I go, and then this is the frame for one of the wings. Because I wanted the model, but they're like, Lego has things for like $400 for this thing, and it's like I'm not spending $400 for a Lego set. And there's no other models, so I thought, well, I'll just build one from scratch. And so it's a new experience, but I mention it because as a leader and as a professional, even as a student, you need to make sure that you have a hobby or two, something that you can just use to de-stress. It'll help you so you can focus better and you can actually improve your effectiveness as a leader just by making sure that you have a hobby because you're taking care of your own personal well-being. So now that we've taken a little tangent, Bonnie, I see you. Let me get you marked down there. Let's see. There you go. And I think we have another. We got someone else here. We got Bonnie, Xander, Peter, and me. All right. If anyone else shows up, I'll have to take notes of it. So let me share our PowerPoint for today. There we go. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Awesome. So last week we finished by talking about some generalizations for the tops, middles, and bottoms. Those are terms that Barry Oshry uses in his book and in his lectures and in his workshops. We talked about how the tops are like senior leaders within that system. The middles are like middle management in that system. The bottom are the workers within that system. And remember that it depends on the scope of the system you're looking at. You have to define the hierarchy within that system. This way you can identify tops, middles, bottoms. Well, today we're going to start by talking about providers and customers, which is the last of the relationships that Barry Oshry talks about. So a provider literally provides a service or a product to a customer. So you have the one providing what's needed, and then you have the one that's receiving what's needed. So I used the educational system as an example because we're all in it in one way or another, or have been in it for years. The university or college is the provider. They offer a service or a product. In this case, it's education. You, the students, are the customers. You are receiving that service. The career counselor would be an example of a provider also. Once again, depending on the scope of the system. So if we go from looking at the university down to a department, now the advising department, the counselors there would become the providers. They provide guidance pertaining to the potential career students might be able to enter after completing their degree plan. You have to limit the system. We've seen how a person can be a top in one system, a middle in another, and yet a bottom in even a third, because we belong to multiple systems. Now, what if those systems are all contained within an organization? You're a member of a class. That class is a system, but that system of the class belongs to academics inside the university. That is a system. Now we back up further. The university is the organization. It's a system. And so the level of top, middle, and bottom changes depending on which magnitude you're using to view that system. And as you zoom in or out, these positions change. We've also seen how a person, as in the case above, like a professor, can be a bottom, a top, and a provider. I am a bottom when I'm dealing with the system of the faculty, okay? The middle would be the dean and the VP. The top would be the board and the president. When we look at academics, I am a middle because the students are at the bottom. I'm in the middle. The dean and the provost are the tops. So it depends. And in the classroom, I'm the top, the students are the middle. And if there was an informal leader in the class that rose up through the ranks, then that person would become the middle. So again, it depends on whether you look at the system through a microscope or a telescope. So you've got to make sure that you identify the scope of the system and the hierarchy contained within it. Spatial blindness. In the textbook, Barry Oshry, he states, in organizations, much of the time we think we are dealing person to person, when in fact we are dealing context to context. So what is a context? Oshry wrote, when interacting with tops, we are not just dealing person to person. We are dealing with people living, sometimes struggling to survive in a world of complexity and accountability. Lots of issues to deal with. Remember, when you're dealing with somebody who's in a position of authority over you, or if you're a person in authority and your direct reports are dealing with you, we have lives outside of the system. We might have a plumbing problem in our apartment or our home, and the kitchen is flooding out. We're worried about it. A loved one might be in the hospital or really ill, and that's weighing on our minds. You see, this is why I bring it up in this class, but I also bring it up in more detail in my organizational behavior class. We need to use empathy, and we got to also identify, is there a reason that this individual's behaving in this negative way? So if you have a direct report whose behavior suddenly becomes negative when they're normally positive, pull them to the side and say, you know what? I'm not taking notes. I'm not going to record this. I'm not going to write it down. This is informal. Is everything okay? Are there some issues going on in your life? And if there are, let them talk. Get them to open up. Maybe you can help them. Maybe you can connect them with a plumber that you know. Maybe you have a friend who's a plumber and you connect them with that plumber. So we need to be considerate and empathetic that the people we are dealing with sometimes are reacting and responding not to us, but to another context. So we may not always be privy to that context, but bear in mind, if somebody is normally one type of behavior and suddenly they're quite different, the context probably has shifted in their life. Still talking about spatial blindness, this concept goes back to the other lectures we have had. In psychological safety, if you remember, Clark pointed out that there are 3 levels of accountability: task, process, and outcome, and that these lead to varying levels or degrees of autonomy. In the video we watched in week 9, Singh discussed that as leaders plan for the future, they need to understand that they are a vital component and need to develop a work environment free from additional stressors while considering the system or systems they are a part of. Leadership is all about relationship. Leadership can be a position if it's a formal leader or a formal leadership position. The informal leader is obviously not a position. But when you take that position as a formal leader, you're agreeing to being active in relationships with each of the people that report to you that are on your team. You need to allow for feedback, positive and negative. You need to allow them to challenge the status quo. You need to provide psychological safety. There are a lot of things you have to do in order to create this environment that is free from additional stressors, because our people are already going to be stressed just because of life itself. Okay. And as a leader, we need to bear that in mind. So spatial blindness, Cindy noted that today's world is very complex, and as a species, we do not necessarily understand or comprehend this complexity. We are humans. Humans are very complex. In any given moment, our mind is consciously going through 40 things. Subconsciously, we're going through 11 million things. It is incredible the amount of information going through in our brains. We might be sitting there zoning out, watching our favorite TV show. Our brain is still going. The leaders Oshri was discussing, he was trying to tell them how they are affected by numerous issues and influence from external sources. Every moment of our life as an individual, and especially as a leader, we've got multiple factors and variables affecting that moment, influencing, impacting us. It changes how we make decisions. We have got to learn how to identify as many of these factors and variables as possible. Yet we will never identify all of them. That's why for decision making, it really is best if you include the team, because you're getting multiple perspectives and you're able to identify multiple factors that are stressing that situation or altering that situation. But even there, you're not going to be able to identify every single factor. So what do? We use this information to make a decision, hoping that we're able to aim it towards a spectrum, a range of potential outcomes, ranging from the best to the worst that we're willing to accept. And then that's what we're shooting for. But we're aware that because of this multitude of factors impacting and affecting us, there's a good probability we will hit an outcome we were not planning for. When that happens, we either need to stop, back up, and go at it again, or roll with the punches. Sometimes an unintended consequence turns out to be a positive thing. So do we keep this complexity in mind when we are expecting the leader to either listen to us or directly deal with an issue in the organization? Most of the time, we're not. Most of the time, we're focused on the problem we are experiencing because it affects us. So we get blinders and we become spatially blind to the context of what we and the other person are going through. By systems thinking, we're able to remove the blinders because we know that they're going to go there automatically. They're just, boom, they're there. We learn to take them off and look at the situation as a system. Remember, in a system, you got multiple elements. Those are people, policies, procedures, products, services, etc. You analyze those. You use that microscope, so to say. But then you don't stop there. You back up metaphorically and you look to see how are these elements connected. The interconnection is really what we're looking to identify. That helps us to understand the context of the situation that we and the other element are now involved in. We each have life stress that impacts us. And I worded that way for a reason. That's because there can be stressors in life, but there is a life stress. There is a stress of just being alive, being on this planet, being here and being now. There is stress. Leaders experience this also, not just the employees, not just team members. And as a leader, if you're in the middle, you have to realize your direct reports are experiencing this life stress, And the tops above you are experiencing this life stress, each in their own way. Once again, that's the context. So if you're dealing with your supervisor and you're talking to them about a problem that one of your bottoms brought to you, you are dealing with three different sets of context: the bottoms, the top, and you in the middle. Oshry noted that this complexity of life, he noted this complexity of life when he addressed the way to be heard by the tops. If you want someone in authority over you to hear you when you talk, first put yourself in their shoes. This is a mental exercise, and learn how best to approach them. If you know some of the context that they're experiencing in that moment, then you can tailor how you approach them, how you communicate with them. You do so in a way that shows empathy, that shows understanding, but from a standpoint of being a leader, you're trying to get a goal or a task accomplished or to support your team doing that task. You need to make sure that you're successful in getting the resources. So you don't want to be going into your supervisor blowing up about things or approaching it when you have no idea what the context is. The three context is, I don't know how you would say that. Take time, walk in their shoes for a minute in your mind, and then approach them. Oshry pointed out that a bottom can often feel invisible and vulnerable. And just as with the tops, bottoms are impacted by the complex nature of life, but they feel they have no control over their situations. You see, that's an indicator. A bottom is going to feel like they have no control over their situations, that they're invisible and that they're vulnerable. Let's back up for a second. Here we are looking at tops. What do they feel? They feel complexity. They feel accountability weighing on their shoulders. They feel that there are a lot of issues to deal with. They're struggling. So they're dealing with stuff emotionally and rationally, just like the bottom is, but in a different way. The bottom feels they can't control anything because they're not in a position of power. They're not in a position of accountability. Here again, Oshry noted that the bottoms are human beings who experience life's problems, and it adds to that complexity. He noted this complexity of life when he addressed that the way that tops should place themselves in the bottom shoes to understand better what they are feeling and experiencing and learn how best to approach them. So as a supervisor, as a top, if I put myself in my direct report's shoes for a minute, and I think, what would it feel like if I felt as though I had no control at work, in other areas of my life? What if I felt invisible, like no one actually even saw me or heard me? What if I felt vulnerable, like I can't protect myself because I have no authority? What's the best way to approach them? I need to talk to them. I need to tell them how to do this project. How do I do it? Put yourself in their shoes first. Oshry continued by pointing out that many times a middle can feel like they're being torn between two or more directions. Now, just like the tops felt that accountability and that complexity, and the bottoms felt vulnerable and they felt invisible, in the middle, you can see and identify, am I a middle, or do you feel like you're being torn in two different directions? Do you have people that are asking from you, and then you got to go to someone else to get that resource? If so, you're a middle. Oshry diligently noted that middles are just trying to survive life too. He also discussed when he wrote, they, meaning the middles, are pulled between you and others. What you want from them, they don't have. They need to go get it. They need to go to others to get it. And what others want from them, they need to come to you and get. So that middle is literally a go-between. They're literally in the middle. They don't have the resources, but they have access to the person with the resources. They're not accomplishing the task, but they are there to support and lead those that are the bottoms. So they need to be able to provide that. But before they can go request the resource from the tops, they need to listen to the bottoms to be able to find out what it is they actually need. This quote really puts tearing into perspective. They, meaning the tops, demand, they have, let me try this again. They have the tops demanding that they do certain things while the bottoms find that the middles do more for them. Okay, so you're sitting there, you're at the bottom. The tops are making all these demands on the organization, on the team, on the bottoms, on the middles. The bottoms are feeling vulnerable. They're feeling invisible. And then they realize that the middle is doing more for them than they realize, because the middle is running between the tops and the bottoms to get resources, to get extra man hours, to get this, to get that, to stand up for them, to fight for them, to protect them so they don't feel so vulnerable, to speak for them so they don't feel invisible. Oshri turned his attention then to the customers. He noted that customers feel neglected by the providers. So if you want to see if you're a customer, do you ever feel neglected by the provider? When I got a problem with my phone, I need to contact AT&T, which is a nightmare because I have to go through the app to find how to get a hold of them. I get a hold of them. I have to go through this whole process of them verifying who I am, just so I can tell the person what my problem is. 9 times out of 10, that person's not actually listening to me, so I have to say it again. Then they've got to put me on hold while they go through a manual or they go talk to their supervisor to figure out how to solve the problem. So I feel neglected by them. Oshri wrote, they, meaning the customers, are not getting the attention they feel they deserve. They are shunted from one person to another. Products and services are not coming to them as fast as they want, at the level of quality they want, and at a satisfactory price. I use Amazon a fair amount. And I do that because I can find a really good price on a lot of things. However, I'm depending on Amazon fulfilling my order, the delivery person actually delivering it, and the manufacturer having provided something that's actually going to function. If one of those things falls apart, I feel neglected. I had 2 orders about 2 months ago. Order 1 was delivered, not to my apartment. It was delivered to a different apartment. I had to go looking for it. I'm trying to get a hold of Amazon customer service, another nightmare, trying to get that resolved. I finally find my package. A week later, it happened again. I literally felt neglected. And was it the fulfillment center? No, it was the delivery driver. At that point, Amazon as a whole is the provider. So when the delivery driver fails, I, as the customer, see Amazon failing. Oshri also wrote, if we are able to see into the customer's world, we have a better understanding of why our customer reacted to our nice gesture with anger and sarcasm. I want to pause there. When I had my problem with Amazon delivering my packages, I was not a pleasant person on the phone. I admit to that. Okay. The poor person, the Amazon customer service agent, tried to provide me a nice gesture to placate me, to keep me and retain me as a customer. I did respond with anger and sarcasm because all I wanted was for them to do their job and have a delivery person bring it to my door like it was agreed to be done. So OSHA continues, customer was not interested in a tour of the facility. Customer was not interested in coffee and donuts. Customer was not interested in completing our customer questionnaire. Customer was only interested in quality service, and quality service was not forthcoming. It's easy to see how customer experienced all our nice gestures as neglect. True. When the Amazon customer service agent was trying to placate me, I literally saw it as them kicking the can down the road. I saw it as neglect. Yes, Barry Oshie writes in a weird way. That's because he puts customer as a noun and he puts it in there almost like a name. So this is not my paraphrasation. I did not. This was a direct quote, literally direct from the book. So there's a sideshow. We need to consider the sideshow. Oshie wrote, organizational life, basically all of life, is a circus with stuff coming at us from many directions. Noxious stuff, mysterious stuff, minus stuff. In the circus of life, we have two choices. We can head for the sideshow or stay in the center ring. So the sideshow. There's lots of drama, attractive stories with good parts for us. We are either the hero of our story or the poor, blameless victim of those bad guys. That's a quote from Oshie. So if you find yourself in that situation, lots of drama happening. Yes, there's a kind of a salacious story happening, developing. We might see ourselves as the good guy, or we might see ourselves as the victim. You're in the sideshow. You're a customer and you're in the sideshow, or you're a bottom and you're in the sideshow, or you're a middle or a top and you're in the sideshow, because any of these levels within that system can end up in the sideshow. In the sideshow, we make excuses and we feel indignant. We can waste time, effort, friends, and work relationships. The sideshow is not a positive place to be. It's a place that we find ourselves, but we find ourselves going around in a circle. We're not being effective. We're not being productive. We're not accomplishing what we had set as our goal. Now, the center ring. This is where we place ourselves. This is when we place ourselves, or actually it's where. This is where we place ourselves in the shoes of others and actually have empathy for them. So we're using the center ring and the sideshow metaphorically as a location. So when we place ourselves in that center ring, we are empathetic about other people and the context of their situations and their level in the within that system. In the center ring, we are less judgmental and we can avoid the trappings of stuff of life, thus being more focused. We can also focus on establishing and maintaining professional and personal relationships. The center ring is where we put our ego on hold. The center ring is where we bring out our empathy, our understanding, our non-judgmental perspective. Okay. In the center ring, Oshie pointed out that seeing systems is not simply a minor shift in behavior. In the center ring, we are challenged and we must let go of the stuff that often holds us back. So in that center ring, we are in a place of we can let go. We can let go of that stuff that's holding us back. And what is that stuff holding us back? It's the context. Whatever the context is, we've got to be able to let go. Now, can I do something about the plumbing when my kitchen's flooding? Well, I can do something about it, but not everything. I don't have all the tools for it. I may know how to do it, but I don't have the equipment. But what I can do is I can get a hold of maintenance because I live in an apartment building and I'll let them handle it, which means I get to let go of that context. Otherwise, it's going to become that stuff that holds me back, that stress of life. Now we're going to get to TOOT time, toot time. Sounds ridiculous, but this is actually a brilliant strategy. Don't have to read here for a minute and a half. That's a lot. Oshie wrote about his experience trying to annotate every possible event that occurred during the workshops. Let me set the context for you. Oshie has these workshops. People come in, they participate. They are practicing systems thinking. They're given scenarios. They're given a budget. They're given a task. They set up businesses. All of this done in a role play kind of way. And he's sitting there and wanting to write down everything that happens, but he realized he couldn't. So let's continue. It was impossible. I couldn't keep up with the action. Too much was happening in too many different locations. By that, he's referring to the different groups in the room. And even if I could see it all, which I couldn't, there was important information that was invisible to me. I had no access to people's experiences. What were they thinking and feeling? How were they experiencing their worlds? How were they experiencing people in other parts of the system? Eventually, we solved the problem by creating the time out of time, the TOOT, the TOOT. And having created it, it became clear that it was less important that I saw what was happening throughout the system than that all the system members saw it. In other words, the researcher realized I don't have to see every single thing that's occurring in these workshops. The people involved in these scenarios, they're the ones that need to see it. So let's continue because we're not done with TOOT. TOOTs require that all participants are completely honest and that each person listens intently. You speak clearly, you speak honestly, but you're not there to hurt people, and you're actively listening when others speak. Oshri gave 2 conditions for time out of times to be successful. Each participant must share when they share. Well, let's try that again. Participant must be sincere when they share their experiences. Can each participant accept the experiences of others in the system? So think of it like an after-action review. They've been doing this, they take a break, they all come together. We have a chance to give feedback to the entire group now. When this occurred, I felt like this. When this happened, this is what I did to respond. And this is how I felt. But it requires that everybody involved in that time out of time accepts that the experiences of the other people, as they tell them, are valid, true, and real. Let's say that this class has done a time out of time. We are beginning, and I open the floor up, and Bonnie, she tells me how she felt during the exercise. If I don't agree with her because I experienced something else, I need to pause my perception and I need to look through her eyes. I need to metaphorically be in her shoes, and I need to see that her feelings are just as valid as mine, even though they might be completely opposite. I hope that makes sense. Oshri gave 6 potential outcomes that can occur when time out of times are done. The first is illumination, and this is where system members learn to see the big picture. They are learning to use synthesis. Empathy can happen, and this includes understanding and patience. This is where, when Bonnie talks about what she experienced, I actually think of what would it feel like to be in her shoes in that situation, and I now express empathy. I may not say anything, but I have empathetic feelings. I have empathetic understanding. I'm more patient as Bonnie talks. The next thing that can occur is depersonalization. And this is where system members learn not to take everything so personally. Inside of teams and groups, we still are human beings. We're individuals in that setting. That setting does not remove our individuality. Part of this individuality is called my ego. And my ego always wants to be right, but truly it's only right part of the time. My ego wants for the way I see the system to be the right way. That leads to me only agreeing with people that express something similar to my viewpoints. So if Peter is involved in this time out of time, and Bonnie just said all of her piece, she did it right. She, however, experienced something completely opposite to my experience. Peter then talks and he expresses something similar to mine. I actually would pay attention more to Peter, and group think begins to develop, and group think is detrimental. This is the echo chamber occurring. Instead, I should see both Bonnie and Peter and myself as having a valid perspective, because it's this drama unfolding on a stage and we're each in our own seat. Now we got a chance during intermission to mingle and we talk about what we've been witnessing on the stage. From my perspective, the actors looked like this. From Peter's perspective, he had a different angle. He was able to see more detail. Bonnie was in a place she could hear the voices more clearly. So each of us has a piece of the reality. Collectively, we can have a better view of that reality, but we have to depersonalize ourselves and this situation. The next thing that can occur is revitalization. And this is where system members learn to avoid withdrawing. Revitalization is important because you want the individuals to realize that their perspectives are valid. They want to feel like they are being seen, that they're being heard, and that they don't have to self-censor and withdraw. So you want them to experience revitalization. Bonnie got to talk about what she felt, even though it was different from Peter and myself, but she was welcomed and what she said was accepted. That doesn't mean that I see the situation like Bonnie saw it. It means I accept she saw the situation like she saw it. I saw it the way I did. Peter saw it the way I did. If we put it all together, we can find out what the common reality is. Another thing that can occur is problem solving is not the reason. Let me back that up. This is not on that list. Problem solving is not the reason for conducting a time out of time, but a time out of time can lead to discovering solutions to problems. So don't enter a time at a time with your team wanting to solve problems. That's not the purpose. The purpose of the time out of time is that each person has an opportunity to explain the reality they perceived, the feelings they felt. Another thing that can occur is strategic planning, and this is where individuals learn to see how life impacts others and begin to cooperate with them. In this example, Bonnie, she said what she experienced. It's not what Peter and I experienced, but now we are impacted by her perspective. We can cooperate with her. Maybe Peter and I did not communicate with her effectively during the exercise or during the project. So now we say, we need better communication. So we begin communicating and cooperating by accepting feedback and encouraging Bonnie to be giving feedback to us. We're working in a very strategic manner now. Time out of times benefit virtually all systems, such as families, organizations, etc. Remember, what you're learning right now is not just for the workplace. This systems thinking is something that can be applied in all systems. There's a caveat. This is not the answer to every problem in every system, but it is a starting point, okay? You may have to use a different approach. You may have to use a different methodology, but you need to identify what the problem is, who and what the elements are, how they interconnect, and the outcome of that interconnection. Time out of times are not the solution. They do not tell system members what they must do. Instead, they let each system member see others as they actually are. So now Peter and we see Bonnie as being a viable human being. She's not being a contrarian. She's not being difficult. She is literally being legitimate. She wants to participate, but this is what she's experienced. And now, because we took this time out of time and we heard each other, she knows that Peter and I aren't being stubborn. We just didn't see what she was experiencing. So now what can we do? We can learn to cooperate. This is the reference page, which means we are now done with the lecture material for this week. I could go longer, but I don't want to, and let me explain why. We just this week, between these two lectures, went through a lot of material. We're not discussing cosmology or chemistry. We're discussing human nature in groups, human beings, their needs, their stresses, the situations, the circumstances. I want each of you to take some time and to really process through this. And remember, systems thinking is not the solution to everything. Time out of times is not the solution to everything, but they may be the solution more often than what you first realized. And if anything else, now you are learning to be more active in how you view things. We can become over analytical and we can overanalyze an element. But there's a point where we got to stop analyzing and say, how does this element interconnect to the other elements in this system? And at that point, we might realize we need to use a different methodology. That systems thinking may not be the best solution in that moment. But because we took the time to analyze and then use synthesis to try to at least get a start, we got a clearer picture of what this problem is. Does anybody have any questions today? Bonnie and Peter, sorry I picked on you, but you're here and I figured you could take it. Xander, I let you have the day off from being picked on.
Oh, thank you.
I literally don't care.
You're a good sport. Thank you. No questions? Well, if you run into any, please contact me. Send me an email. We'll have a conversation about it and hopefully clear up any confusion. And I also would be very interested as you learn through the next few weeks what you notice and perceive through learning this material. Because this, oftentimes, a classroom environment, the professor is seen as being the source of the knowledge, and the students are supposed to absorb it, which is partially true. But to me, my students are also a source of knowledge, and I need to absorb that. So don't ever hesitate to share with me things that you discover as we go through this. Okay? I want you